Welcome everybody back to the Growers Podcast. Today we are talking about extinct plants. There are some incredible plants that have gone extinct due to the negligence of a bunch of idiots who let them go extinct, which we would never do. Here at the Growers Podcast, we grow plants, not make them go extinct. So let's get right down to brass tacks, Lucas.
Yeah.
First, we'll talk about the Cooksonia, which is the oldest. So the first few I have are known just from like the fossil record. The Cooksonia is believed to be the first known plant that had like a vascular system. So basically, it was derived from the first plants were evolved from algae. So they had to grow in bodies of water. All right. They could only grow in water. And this plant was around about 400 million years ago. And it was the first plant that had capillaries where it could drive the water up to it. And so it could grow on dry land. And it was called Cooksonia. And it was, like I said, evolved from algae. And it had no leaves. It was just a weird stem plant that had only stems. But it was the first known plant that could grow out of water, and it's not known exactly how it photosynthesized. But here at the Growers Podcast, the scientists don't know how it photosynthesized. Here at the Growers Podcast, we know because we've grown the what's that plant around here that has the green stems that can photosynthesize from the stem? The ratama.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
the ratama.
So that must be how. I think there's a few plants around here that are. Or just like in desert areas, there are some plants.
That weird vine. What is that called? The sticker burrs. Those it's right here. You see that green vine there? Those don't get leaves.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, they don't get leaves until they get up into the trees, and usually around here they don't really get up into the trees. So the vast majority of the time that you see that in Austin, it's not going to have any leaves.
Yeah. So basically, all these scientists are like, "Oh, we don't know. We have these, fossil records of this plant, the Cooksonia. How did it survive?"
A bunch of birds don't understand that you don't need leaves to photosynthesize.
Yeah. So that's obvious. So that's right off the bat, one solved mystery.
Aspen trees also photosynthesize through the bark.
Yeah. So it's simple. 400 million year old mystery. We've solved it in about 30 seconds. So easy work. Another one was called the Calamitous, which is in the horsetail genus. So you know those things, they grow around here in water, the horsetails. They're basically hollow stems that grow, it's kind of similar to like bamboo or something like that, but it grows just in water. And actually, I don't think those have leaves either, do they?
No, bamboo can have leaves.
Bamboo does, but not leaves. The horsetail.
But, horsetail does not have leaves.
So basically, these went extinct about 250 million years ago, and they would grow, if you can imagine those horsetail plants that still exist, it was like those, except they would grow like 100 feet tall. And when they got big enough, they'd start branching out. So they looked kind of like trees, but they were just like those hollow horsetail things that grew only in water. They just were a giant version of it. And a lot of these like ancient plants were kind of giant versions of plants that exist today. And so we're going to get into in part 2. Make sure you check out part 2. Giant pitcher plants, giant carnivorous plants. People say that they're myth, they're hoaxes, but there's a lot of plants that grow now that in the past giant versions of grew. And it's the same with animals too. Like there's giant bears and like
the short-faced bear.
Yeah, so that's just kind of a thing, that there used to be giant, huge versions of things that still exist today. So why could there not have been giant pitcher plants that ate people? Carnivorous Venus flytraps that could snatch a person in them. Who knows? Maybe they were real. But that's the calamitous.
I think plants. I saw that in an anime once.
Yeah, and as we know, most anime comes from historical truth.
Totally.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's calamitous. Basically, it was these giant hollow bamboo-like plant, and it had a huge underground rhizome, like cattails, horsetails, like whatever these things that exist today still currently have. Um,
Now we still have giant horsetail reed, except it only gets like 3 feet tall.
yeah, so that's our giant version of it today.
Yeah, it's from China,
Yes.
so it's pretty cool.
So, ni hao, xie xie.
And its roots are really deep. So if this is a trick, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. You can plant horsetail reed in with cactus, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
though horsetail reed needs lots of consistent water, and the cactus needs to stay dry.
Mm-hmm.
If you use sandy soil, like really sandy soil, so where
Mm-hmm.
it drains really fast, you can plant them both at the same level in the same pot. It's just that you need to have water in the bottom
Left
like
at the
3 inches.
bottom.
And because the roots
Interesting.
will grow extremely far, extremely fast, and it'll be able to drink all the
Oh,
water down there. It doesn't need all of the sand to be wet. It's used to be, I mean, some of it grows on like beaches where it's dry up here and then it's wet down there. And so you can
interesting.
plant these water loving plants with these dry plants and have them together, and they're just
Probably
fine.
looks very cool.
That looks very
That's a
cool.
great idea. That's some very interesting knowledge, Lucas.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that with us and the viewers today here on the Growers Podcast show here on YouTube, the greatest website of all time. Let's keep going. The Sigillaria. So the Sigillaria was a lycophyte, which is like a very primitive type of plant, primitive type of tree. I think it's related to the Selaginella, if you've heard of those. They're kind of like, I think modern ferns evolved from Selaginellas. And then this was basically something like that was even further back, and it went extinct about 300 million years ago. But it was just these weird plants that, same thing as before, they would grow only in water. But it was like basically if you could imagine like a combination between a tree and a fern, or like a combination between a tree and like moss. Or if you can think of what moss looks like when you like zoom in on it, how it's like it seems like this flat thing, but if you zoom in on it, there's like these little parts like sticking up. If you imagine that, that could grow, you know, 50 feet tall or something like that. That's what lycophytes were hundreds of millions of years ago. So same thing. A miniature version basically exists today, but there was giant ones in the past. So it looked like something out of like a Dr. Seuss book. It looks like a fake plant if you see like pictures of what it would have looked like. It looks kind of like almost like a Joshua tree. If
Mm-hmm.
you've seen those, it's like really long and thin, but like with all these kind of weird stuff at the top. But it was like almost if you can imagine that, like a tree that's like just a long stem and then like with like moss almost growing at the top. So it's
You
very
know,
odd looking.
this is something that kind of repeats as like a theme. It seems like the dominant I don't know, like the dominant like type of something that ends up like taking over the planet in some way, right? They never end up going away, right? But at the same time, they get replaced as the dominant thing by something else, and things just continue to get more complicated. Like I know I explained that badly, but it's like
No, I get what you
if you
mean
think about
though.
like those giant bugs, right? There were
Right.
these giant bugs, and then there were these giant lizards, and they weren't technically giant lizards; they were dinosaurs, which is a different thing. But you had these giant reptiles, right? And you still have reptiles, and the reptiles that were the dinosaurs became birds, so you still have the dinosaurs. They're just
Right.
not huge anymore, right? And you have all these different generations of trees, right? Where like this becomes a tree, and then its lineage ends up splitting up to something else that ends up staying smaller, and the trees die, and then something else ends up evolving into a tree, and it ends up splitting off, and then it dies. And same thing happens with fish, right? You have the round finned fish,
Right.
and the round finned fish are still around. They're just not the dominant ones anymore, right? And you have all these other fish that have replaced them, right? And so it's like all these different things, they end up you end up getting one that gets big and covers the entire planet, and then it's replaced by something else, but not totally replaced. And every time
Right.
you end up like going like the ratio of like it's the same thing happened with mammals. Like mammals end up replacing the dinosaurs, but you know maybe something else will come along, and then some other lineage of some other thing will come along, something evolves from mammals, and then mammals end up being a small
Right.
thing on the side.
That is interesting. It's basically like as things evolve over time, it becomes clear that like one huge plant or one huge animal, which takes so much nutrients and so much whatever protein for an animal, so much. Um, it just takes so much to sustain the life of that one thing that over time it's like instead of one giant tree thing that's 100 feet tall that basically is like a relative of moss, it evolves over time to be smaller but spread out more, so that just instead of one, it basically like the resources to keep one alive now can keep 1,000 alive, you know. And the same with the fish, the same with anything, that it's like that makes perfect sense. So that things would evolve like that, to where if they're much smaller, they need much less resources to survive, and so there can be thousands of them instead of one giant one.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense to me.
I think it's interesting how things continue to get more diverse, though, in this way of where it's like, because the dinosaurs were around for like 100 million years or something, right? They've been around, they were around longer than they haven't been since they died off.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole time they were like
wow.
the dominant species, the dominant like group of the dominant lineage on Earth, like filling like all of the niches,
but
except
the climate
for
was much different,
lower ones. Right. But at the same time, it's like, I think that it's interesting that the dinosaurs didn't disappear, and neither did the amphibians, and neither did the other reptiles, the smaller reptiles, and neither did the fish, and all of these other things that came before it. It's like you end up having like one. It's like that, like the family tree, right, of life. You end up having like the main trunk, something splits off of the main trunk, but the trunk is still there. So it's not that any like there, it's like very few of these branches. It's only the twigs that end up dying off, but you keep all of the main branches branching off of the trunk all the way to the top.
Right.
That's what it seems to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I've never seen that represented. Most of what I've seen represented is like all of these other branches making up these tiny portions of what remains, and then you have the main one coming up and creating like most of the current life, which is mammals or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that I feel like that's not perfectly representative, because you just don't know the kind of diversity that existed before mammals,
Right.
because it would only be in fossils. But like all of these branches, they still exist, right? I think that part is the interesting part, that they were like the mammals being dominant, and now they are still around, but for some reason they weren't able to fill, after whatever killed them off, they weren't able to come back and refill that niche. They were just like permanent losers, I guess. It's like it is like, you know, like fate is deciding like, okay, this one you're going to win for a while and then you're going to lose, and somebody's going to replace you that didn't exist before, but you're doomed to exist forever and watch your replacement also die and be replaced by something else. And like it's just like you're collecting a big, like, you know, like collection of losers, of evolutionary losers on the side.
Kind of, or are those the real evolutionary winners?
Because they just get to stick around forever.
Yeah,
I guess. I mean, they ended up becoming a lot more like durable and capable of like adapting, obviously, because they're still around, and most of them have made it through several, like, you know, mass extinction events or whatever. So,
but yeah, just you're right. Again, it's like we're not really being taught the real truth of the history of the world. We're being taught a very simplified and basic version of it. But here at the Grower Show, we get to the core of the issue.
Yeah,
we get to the heart of the matter, and that's a new, you know, evolutionary tree. That was called the evolutionary tree.
World life tree, life family tree.
The world life tree of life.
Yeah, which is
So anyway,
and we'll get into the tree of life later.
Yes, we will. We sure.
Because that's an important.
Will.
That's an important one.
All right, so I want to talk about the plant Silphium that was most popular, the most like widespread and valuable plant in ancient Rome. But let me talk about one more first. The Araucarioxylon arizonicum, which is a relative of the Araucaria, or it was in the Araucaria genus, which is the Norfolk Island pines, which are a common house plant still today. So again, same thing. This was a plant that grew in huge forests, you know, these giant trees and giant forests. And today, and that was like, I don't know, again, hundreds of millions of years ago, that they would be 200 feet tall with 10-foot tall trunks. And now there are these tiny little like miniature trees that are sold as houseplants basically only. the arcarias. But it was a massive conifer that was native to like Arizona, New Mexico, and the American Southwest, essentially. And there was this huge forest there in northern Arizona that basically there was a millions of years ago there was a volcano that erupted there, and it caused the whole forest to become petrified. So you can still visit it today. This forest from like 100 million years ago, where it's like all broken off and it's all just the stems, but they call it rainbow wood because the way it's like been preserved over time, I think like the rings of it all are like somehow are different colors and it looks crazy. So that's just a cool one of an extinct plant that was preserved due to a volcanic eruption, and you can still visit it today. And they say that a lot of people go there and break off pieces of the wood to like have for themselves, and that's wrong to do. That what nature provided us is not for us to benefit from. What nature provided us is not for us. So go there.
That's a good argument. That's why we need to colonize Mars and Venus. People are upset. Yeah, people are upset. They're like, okay, well, we can't go to Mars and colonize Mars because what about everything that's already there? It's like, if there's any life over there, it's just like microbial life. Nobody gives, like,
Who
nobody.
said that?
Bunch of scientists, nerds.
Yeah, nerds.
Nerds. They don't want us to go there and contaminate what, oh, well, we could find out whether there was life on Mars. It's like, who cares? There isn't any now, basically, right? We should go over there, bring our life over there, rebuild Mars to be habitable for human life, and then plant humans there. Yeah. God gave us Mars to spread
that's
to.
Our God-given right.
Yeah. Mars will be a part of the kingdom of heaven in the future. I believe that.
Totally. So if you see a tree and you want it, then take it. If you see a planet and you can somehow you have the means to get to that other planet, take it.
Take it.
This is America. This is life. This is a world. That's our God-given right. That's manifest destiny.
The moon, that's ours.
Yeah, this is manifest destiny 2.0.
Yeah.
Although the moon, I'm afraid it's not ours, Lucas.
Who does the moon belong to?
Well, it belongs to whoever's currently living there.
Is it
Lucas? How dare you, Lucas?
No, have you not heard that song?
No.
There's the moon.
You might have sent it to me or something. Didn't you show it to me?
I might have sent it to you.
Anyway, no. There are people living on the moon currently. Not people. Maybe people, actually. Who knows?
By not people, do you mean?
I mean, they might be. I mean, they're under the streets and in the tunnels, and they're in the Epstein. They're the island boys out there under the tunnels of the Epstein.
Well, so these moon dwellers are
Saint, you know what?
Are they in the Epstein files?
I haven't got to that yet, but I will search that. The moon, but the dark side of the moon. Think about what Neil Armstrong said. Buzz Aldrin. On the dark side of the moon,
there's an obelisk.
There's something there.
There's an obelisk on the dark side of the moon.
Anyway, let's get to the real.
I think if there is anybody on the moon, we should go over there and we should replace them.
No, they're gonna. Lucas, no. To the people on the moon, we respect you greatly.
Absolutely not. We do not.
We do not support what Lucas's.
No.
Lucas's opinions are.
We need to manifest destiny of that moon. No, we need to populate the moon, Mars, Venus with Americans, Anglo-Americans, the people who have been chosen to inherit the universe.
All right, well, we should try, but it may lead to a war on the moon. That's all I'm saying. There may be some other beings there.
We're really good at war.
Weaponry.
We are really good at war.
There's people there who have weapons evolved.
The United States is one of the greatest conquering nations on Earth.
Of course, but
we conquered half of Mexico.
On not Earth might be a bit more powerful than us.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
The reticulums.
We've conquered a lot of people. We almost conquered Japan.
Yes, but those were people.
Yeah, well, the Japanese...
Not tridactyl beings with blue skin.
The Japanese are superhuman. The Japanese are superhuman. We defeated superhumans that were not afraid to die.
Yes, but again, they're humans. You're forgetting the main point there. Anyway, let's move on from the moon. We'll discuss that in a further episode. We'll discuss that further in a different episode. But let's talk about Silphium, or the laserwort, the laser plant, which was the most valuable plant in ancient Rome, which was native to Libya in the ancient city there was called Cyrene, right?
Cyrenica, yeah,
Cyrenica, Cyrene.
Cyrenica. Cyrene, I think, was the
Yes.
name of the tribe or the region or something.
But
I
yes,
don't
this
know.
became like the most valuable plant in ancient Rome, and it was said that it was worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
So it was highly valued, and the resin, what was valued, which was called laser picium, no laser piss,
Laser Picium, I think.
laser picium.
Something like
I
that.
don't know. We're not Roman. We can't really speak what
Laser
it says,
Pitium,
but it was used as a perfume, but also as a medicine.
and as an
And
aphrodisiac,
yes, and I suspect that
which is based.
the benefits of it are no longer known. So there's a lot of theories as to what this plant was. That it was perhaps a relative of the giant fennel. That perhaps it's still alive, and it could be the Thapsia gumifera or the Ferulia druidiana, which is the Thapsia gumifera is like a type of fennel plant that still exists in the Mediterranean and in Africa.
Well, the Greeks themselves admitted that there were inferior versions of the same
Oh,
plant living in the Middle East, basically. Like
yeah,
they said that there were inferior versions, far inferior versions living of it, living in that area. So they were saying this is the same plant. It's just that these are different versions of the same plant, right?
right.
And so, I mean, that's part of the debate. Is like, is it even extinct technically, or is it just like, okay, well, the ones growing in this area, maybe took some extra nutrients from the soil or something weird ended up causing some chemical reaction that allowed them to be
Right.
different.
That's
Because that happens in plants now. Like you can get certain effects from some plants grown in some soils, while not other plants grown in others, but while not
right.
the same plant grown in other soil.
Right. And that's why they say a
So
lot of like the fruits and vegetables that we buy today at the grocery store and stuff, they have like a small fraction of the
yeah,
nutritional
like
value that
10%.
they used to because the soil is so depleted.
Yeah,
So it makes me wonder, like with a lot of plants that exist, like is it possible there was like these medicinal plants that were super strong and could cure anything, and that they still exist today to much weakened in a much weakened state, like all these like herbalist plants and these herbs and things that people use today, that it's like there's maybe some effect it's having and some healing effect and anti-inflammatory effect on the body, but that you know hundreds or thousands of years ago the effect was like exponentially greater.
yeah. Maybe THC was stronger in the past.
Maybe. And is it also possible that in some regions there might be soil that's been preserved in like, remote regions or something where you could grow plants there now and achieve a much greater medicinal or
Like Terra Preta.
nutritional, yeah, like terra preta, which we're going to talk about in another episode. But I wanted to talk about the same thing, Lucas, is that some people speculate it was made to go extinct by overharvesting or overgrazing, but a lot of people think that it is this plant that still exists. It's just that the soil became depleted in that area,
Mm,
and it just no longer, the plant didn't necessarily go extinct, but it no longer had the medicinal value that it once did.
right.
So that kind of makes sense to me. um,
It's the only, and I tried to find other plants that were recorded as going extinct before the 90s, the
mhm.
1990s, and I couldn't find like basically anything. Like there were
Yeah,
some things, but it wasn't like, it wasn't really, it was really nothing that mattered. It was like there, and people didn't really say that they didn't exist anymore. People didn't say that they went extinct. They said
right.
it doesn't grow here anymore, right? Which means, and the problem with this, with knowing whether things were going extinct
Just keep going. I'll
between
check.
50 and 100 BC, or 50 and 100 AD, and because they believe that that Silphium went extinct in like 50 AD. Um,
Oh
so
yeah.
yeah, so like if there were any plants that went extinct between 50 AD and 1994, we wouldn't know because nobody really believed that plants could go extinct for some reason. For some reason, they just believed that, you know, like they understood that seeds grew plants and that seeds came from plants. And so like you would think that because they understood the cycle, the life cycle for all of these, you know, species, they would understand that they don't come from nothing. And that if you break that life cycle for all of the individuals of a certain species, then that species would disappear. But for some
Right.
reason, they seem to believe that you can break all of those life cycles and it would just pop up somewhere again and it would be fine.
People are so dumb.
But that's not how that works. You know, you kill
No.
all of something and it doesn't come back. It disappears forever.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you can have like seeds hidden in like the seed bank of the soil, but that really depends on the species and the location, and that's pretty risky to count on. So,
Unbelievable.
I mean, there was that. I forgot. I totally forgot about this until literally this moment. But there was that species. There was like that temple that was uncovered in like Israel or something, or Syria maybe.
Right, and they grew a seed that was like
Yeah.
2,000 years old or
And
something.
I think that tree species had since gone extinct or something, but I'm
right.
not sure.
Yes, no, I believe so.
But I should have looked into that. I completely forgot about it until this moment.
And I read we should do another episode maybe about that, bringing back these old plants through like fossils, or not fossils, but preserved. Because I read another one that was like some stuff was like preserved in like permafrost,
Yeah,
and they were
seeds in
able to grow a
permafrost.
seed that
Yeah,
was, I think, even older. That was like 10,000 years old or something.
yeah,
And it was some very like primitive looking plants that looked pretty cool. So,
yeah. No, like I think that
Yeah.
would be super sick. But like
be sick, dog.
but yeah, I think that is the main issue as to why because there were for sure plants going extinct that entire time. The
Right.
entirety of like human existence as we've been farming,
Right.
there have been plants going extinct that we were aware of when they existed, and we were aware of them disappearing. We just didn't realize that they were gone for good, and so we didn't bother to keep note of it.
Yeah, like maybe until like people could kind of like today know about what's happening in the whole world due to technology and stuff, people always just assumed like, it's just locally not growing here. It must be growing somewhere else though. We won't worry about it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's just very stupid. And you know, if we were alive back then, Lucas, we would have never let this shit go extinct. We would have collected our own databases of seeds, our own seed banks for our own personal use, and we would have had all the plants that no one else had.
Yeah.
And we still may do that.
Yeah, if we can go back in time, we could do that.
Yes, and we will. That's another thing that we'd like to discuss with all viewers. We will be going back in time.
Yeah, we will be going back in time
as we research our time machine, and that's something that also that devil man out on the island. Apparently, you're not supposed to say his name, but the guy we're talking about in the files, he was also discussing that quite a bit. Time travel.
Really? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I think that we could for sure time travel. The reason why I want to time travel is I want to go get me a Old Norse speaking wife, because I want to raise my kids speaking Old Norse. And I can't speak Old Norse, so I wanted to go get me one of them.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, one of them ladies from like medieval Iceland or something, you know.
Have you seen the Northman or the Norseman?
No.
What the hell is that movie called? Anyway, there's a great movie about this.
About going back in time to get
just
yourself
about,
a wife?
There's a movie like from that. It's just about that time period. It's called The Norseman or something like that. It's a movie from a few years ago. It was a really good movie. So you gotta check that out. I'll share the link with you, Lucas. But anyway, I know you love that stuff. And was that stuff you were talking about last week, the Poetic Edda?
Mm-hmm.
We'll discuss this in our next part, mythical plants and man-eating plants. But there's one mythical plant I learned of from the Poetic Edda, the Idon's apples.
I have not heard of that.
We'll touch upon that in part 2. In part 2, guys, we're going to make sure you stay tuned. We're going to now talk about plants that, in my opinion, more extinct plants. A lot of people online will tell you these plants never existed, that they are just mythological, that they are hoaxes, man-eating plants, magnetic cacti that impaled you, that sucked you into them and impaled you upon their spikes. These are plants that perhaps did exist in the past. And people now say, oh no, those ancient peoples who wrote of them, they were just dumb. They didn't know. These never really existed. But they did.
And I'm going to talk about a plant that does exist, potentially.
Yes, so there's man-eating trees, devil's vines, man-eating bromeliads, different plants that could perhaps make you live forever. And we'll touch upon that in part 2 next week. So stay tuned, everyone. We love you all, and we'll be back next time.
We're going to talk about a sea urchin as well.
Yes, sea urchins.
So,
ow. Okay.